Yeah, you can do that then. You see, do a motion in a second, and then take some comments, okay?
Okay.
And then I'll do,
But not particularly about the incident, about what we're talking about.
just whether or not
Add
it
it
should
to
be
the-
added,
Okay.
and then you'll have general.
So if it's me, John, Chief Whitehorn, we'll have a four. Right? Because those chiefs, Chief Whitehorn, Mayor's representative.
Hey, how are you?
Are they really?
Good.
Oh, it's great. Okay.
That's what Jackie told me, they were members.
Oh, yeah. It's also juice right too.
Yeah. I just want to make sure we had enough to add it. I don't know if phone is coming.
Okay. Yeah, it just has to be unanimous.
Okay. Ready?
Yes,
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting of the Public Safety Committee of the City Council of the City of Shreveport to order today. I'd like to ask Chief Wolverton to give an invocation before we start our meeting. Chief?
Father, we come to you now in the name of Jesus. We thank you for this day and for all your blessings. And we give you praise and glory for who you are, and we thank you for all your blessings. We ask now that we lift up those in our state that have been affected by Hurricane Laura. There's so many, Lord, but we know there's also many that are reaching out, and we know that all things work for the good of those who are called by the Lord and according to their purpose, Lord. So we thank you for those who are reaching out and provide for those, and we do lift them up, and we pray for the recovery of our state from this hurricane. Be with all our elected officials, Lord. Give them wisdom and guidance and decision making. Be with us during this meeting. I pray that everything that we say and do will bring you honor and glory. We ask it in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. All right, moving on. I would like to entertain a motion to add an item to the agenda, which will require unanimous vote of the members that are here. Just to let the public know, the members of the Public Safety Committee are 3 council members, the fire chief, police chief, and a representative from the mayor's office, which today would be Chief Whitehorn. So we're adding to the agenda a conversation about restaurant and alcohol license pertaining to the pandemic. Do I have a motion to add this to the agenda? Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, now, we also will entertain public comments just about adding it to the agenda, not about what we'll be discussing in that, but just adding it to the agenda. Do we have any public comments in favor of adding it? Any public comments not in favor of adding it? Okay, call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we'll take that up. We'll go ahead and take that up first on the agenda after the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for the August 18th meeting?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, now it's time for public comments. We invite the public to make a comment, but limit your comments to 3 minutes, and also state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Chase Boydum. I live at 640 Dudley. I'm here to speak about the bars with the conditional restaurant permit. We received an email yesterday from some sort of enforcement agent saying, city enforcement agent saying that our conditional restaurant permits weren't valid. And, you know, as you can see, I'm working another job to survive for, you know, we've been closed almost 4 months of the year. We spent a considerable amount of money putting in a kitchen and following all the rules. And, you know, it's been extremely frustrating dealing with this because we have followed the letter of the law, like, to the T. I mean, even before there were mask mandates, we were wearing masks. We were doing everything that we possibly could. In fact, we got open the day of the hurricane last week. We had people come off the casino drunk, and I'd sent them away. I said, look, we're a restaurant, we're here to serve food, and then to be threatened to be closed. I just called my employees back, many who came off of unemployment, okay? And now if I have to close tomorrow or sometime this week, they're probably not going to get employment for 2 weeks. And then you got citizens here who are not going to be getting paid, for multiple days. And I don't even understand what it's about, because there are laws that prevent restaurants from doing a lot of things they've been doing, dropping tables in their parking lots, but everybody's looked the other way. But it seems like for us, it's a constant battle, and we are constantly being picked on. And if I thought that there was a reason for that, and if I thought that we were, somehow, responsible for this, I would personally turn in my keys and say, hey, look, I need to be closed. Last night we closed at 11 o'clock. Most of our people are eating, having a few drinks, and leaving. It's not some sort of dangerous atmosphere, if you will. And it's just been really frustrating, because I've been dealing with some stuff like this with permitting over and over and over, and it feels like Shreveport's not a kind place to business. My dad's business that I'm working for right now in Bossier to make ends meet is in Bossier. It's a big company. I would love for it to be here in Shreveport, but the constant joke is that Shreveport's not business friendly, and it really feels that way now. I've been here, I've opened 8 different bars and restaurants. I opened a tech company here, and all I've ever wanted to do is live here and be able to make ends meet, and I would have never gone through the process of getting this permit had I known the city would do anything they could to basically prevent what I'm doing. And it's very painful, and it's very stressful, and I hope that we can come to some quick solution to it, because, again, I didn't get open to break any rules. We got open to just make ends meet, provide for, my employees and that type of thing. And we're not making big money right now. We're just trying to survive, essentially. And it's very frustrating. I wish I had more time to talk about it, but I just wanted to get the hits out there and let you know, exactly the way I'm feeling and how tough it is. But I think that's all. Thank you for.
All right, thank you, Mr. Borden.
Yes, sir.
We'll definitely have a discussion on this, so hang around.
Yes, sir.
Does anyone else have public comment? Tim? Also, while Mr. Huck's on his way up here, I'd like to welcome Chairman Flurry, who has joined us via Zoom. All right, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. Timothy Huck, 764 Smokehouse Loop, Benton, Louisiana. I'm the owner of Sandbar, and at the present time in downtown Shreveport. At the present time, I am more of a pizza place than a bar. I've extended I increased the size of my kitchen. I increased all of my equipment in my kitchen, and even put a person that I hired to do during day just to take care of ordering catering and cooking for all of my catering. I own other businesses and other restaurants, and I'm doing all of my catering out of Sandbar, which, by the way, is increasing my revenue in Sandbar, which is increasing the sales tax I pay to Shreveport, which all that same catering I'd still have. It would just be operating out of my Bossier establishment. So I've increased y'all's revenue at the same time. My problem with the email that we got was it said that they had multiple complaints that we were bars. We're operating under a state order, which is the executive order from the governor, and the governor's office, the ATC, and the state fire marshal have all given us instruction. I've been inspected by the ATC and the state fire marshal and the Shreveport fire marshal, and none of them said I was doing anything wrong. Then I get an email that says we're doing this, this, and this wrong, but in the email, it even plainly, they showed me that my license for the city is a bar, but the city doesn't have an executive order that says bars have to be closed. It's a conditional restaurant license we have from the state. It's conditional because the state realizes that we cannot do 60-40 food. We're doing 50-50. The conditional only requires 50-50. The city requires 60-40. That's why they gave us a conditional. They understand we are a bar operating as a restaurant. The state doesn't want us closed either. The state wants the revenue. The state wants us to survive. They're doing what they can to make the adjustments so that we can survive. In the email that they sent me, they showed me a long list of the executive orders. He sent the full executive order. 8 out at restaurants every single day. I don't see anyone enforcing the 6-foot mandate. I don't see anyone enforcing mask mandate. So why do we pick one particular item we want to enforce? They also showed me where I checked restaurant, but I've also checked on premise. And even in the email I was sent, it told me that we can do curbside and to-go. I don't have a license to do curbside and to-go, but I do have a license to be a bar in Shreveport, Louisiana. And so, without a Shreveport mandate, why would you tell me that I can't do what I'm licensed to do, but I can do something I'm not licensed to do? That's just questioning. They turn their heads for a lot of stuff. I know that a lot of restaurants that put tables outside that serve drinks and stuff outside that don't have patio permits. If we're gonna start enforce across the rules, or let's figure out how we can do business together and amicable and, just properly. That's the only thing I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Huck. Any other comments from the public? Yes, Ms. Sellers.
Good morning, Barbara Sellers, 222 Lafitte Road. Just want to say good morning, members. Want to just follow up. I've sent out 2 files to y'all. I know they were large. The geographical information study was a rather large document. I wanted to reiterate that the International Association of Firefighters, the director of the GIS division, has extended that if there are any questions from anyone on this committee or any member of council, that they will fast track that information because the study was done in 2017 and there may have been some small changes. And the other document, want to reiterate, that we sent, it highlights what the firefighters are able and willing to do to advance any type of inclusive initiative for public safety. So please reach out to myself or any member of the board, and we're going to stand in that gap and make sure that we help our fire chief and we help you get the information that you need to advance a package such as that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, last call. Any other public comments? Yes, sir. Mr. Brooks, we'll get you next.
Good morning. My name's Jason Heffern, 146 Charles Avenue here in Shreveport. I own Time Out Sports Bar out on Mansfield Road. In regards to the emails that the folks have spoke about so far, I have to agree with Mr. Boyd and Mr. Huck. I don't understand why we are trying to make business so hard to do in the city of Shreveport. 4 months out of the year we've been shut down. We've gone through the PPP money to pay the employees to keep them going for as long as they can. And my people aren't going to make it much longer. I understand that there might be a law out there or something on the books that says that we can't be operating based on whatever the statute is, but it's the city of Shreveport. We've always been able to find a solution that might be in the gray area, or at least put a moratorium on it without sending emails out saying you have to shut down because you're not in accordance with what the city of Shreveport says. We went through the hoops that we had to go through. We got the restaurant licenses. We've been shut down. We've marked the places where people can't sit. We've pulled chairs out, reduced our capacity, just like Mr. Huck and Mr. Boyd and the rest. I've run restaurants in this town for over 20 years, and I have a bigger kitchen in my bar than most restaurants have. Not only do I have more equipment and more space and more ability to produce the food, I also, during the stay-at-home order, did just like these gentlemen did and added more equipment, more space, more ability to cook food, just in order to try and drive new revenue streams, be it through delivery service, be it through pickup orders, be it through whatever the case may be. We have done everything that we can in order to drive food out of our doors in order to be compliant with what we've done as far as getting the conditional permits for the state. It took a lot of work, it took a lot of money, it took a lot of time for people. It took a lot of effort that people didn't get paid for, and I just don't know why we as bar owners don't have the same rights as the restaurants to be able to sell our product, food and beverage together, in order to make a living for not only our families, but the families of all the people that work for us. And when we look at it on an individual basis, not any bar employs a large number of people, but if you put us all together, that is a huge part of the taxpayer base in Shreveport, Louisiana, along with bars, restaurants, the rest of it. We're not asking for anything special. We're asking for y'all to let us do what we've been doing and been doing in accordance with the law moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. We'll get him and then you're next.
Good morning. Gary Brooks, 851 Wilkinson, Shreveport. I own the Cub Lounge and Restaurant here at the intersection of Erie and Kings. We've been in business 81 years. Had a restaurant for, I believe, about 60 of those years, a steakhouse. We are operating under the conditional restaurant permit, but I really don't want to reiterate what Mr. Huck and Hepburn said. I will have a question more as a citizen. One of the primary reasons for this meeting, my understanding, is to address the long list of cuts that the police department is making, services that they're no longer going to provide. Because I'm guessing because of manpower and budgetary reasons. So why now is the city getting involved in enforcing state mandates? We followed all the state guidelines. Like they said, we've been closed off and on for 6 months. I don't understand why the city of Shreveport is choosing this time to start enforcing state guidelines, strictly from a monetary and manpower standpoint. I don't know if anybody can answer that, or y'all may need to discuss that.
We'll discuss it whenever we're done with public comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Tina Grosjean, 1512 Lafitte Cove. I am not much of a speaker, but I own TK's Tavern on Ninth Street. We are one of the ones that also got the restaurant license. I understand we are not a restaurant. We all understand we're not a restaurant, but we went through hoops to try to make ourselves into as much of a restaurant as we could possibly be, just to make ends meet so we didn't have to shut down. It's not just my livelihood. It's not just my bartenders. It's all my vendors, my beer guys, my liquor guys, my towel guys, my cleaning crew. All these people are affected by this. It's not just the bar. It is a lot of people and their lives. These are unprecedented times, and there are things that the city has turned away from just to help. It's like they're saying, okay, you can serve curbside. Liquor, food, you can serve it curbside. We don't have a license for that. We don't have a permit for that, but you're saying we can do it. So I don't understand what this other issue is. I haven't really gotten a full picture of what we're supposed to do now, something to do with zoning and reapplying for a liquor license or something. These are just unprecedented times, and I think we need to bend a little bit to get us all through this. If we're all in this together, we need to start working together. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I think the way that we'll go on and move on to this, the discussion about the alcohol and restaurant license in the state. I think to start by calling up Chief Raymond or his representative to kind of discuss what started the letter, and then I'm going to turn it over to our city attorney, Ron Latier, after that, to kind of give everybody an update on where the city is, and then I will give you an update on what we think the solution can be. At least the council thinks the solution can be.
Yes,
Chief?
good morning. And I think it's going to be probably more appropriate if I ask Corporal Glass Bradley. He's the one that kind of handled this situation, to kind of walk you through from the beginning of how we were made aware of the permits and what our intent was with those letters.
I'm Corporal Glass Bradley, or Agent Glass Bradley with the ABO office. This was brought to my attention via email from street sergeants saying that Sandbar was operating as a bar, and the city had no knowledge that any bar was open. I made contact with the Sandbar, Mr. Huck, and I advised Mr. Huck, just give us some kind of paperwork where we can figure out a legality to get this figured out on if we're allowing you to operate or still be open during the governor's executive order. So during that conversation, he advised me to put something on paper and he'll contact his attorney. So with that being said, I had to, go through the RS codes and look in the ordinance to see where we stood as far as the applications and if the ATC license was valid. And during my research, I looked into the ATC license on the website. One of the first things that they need to provide to get that license is a permit from the city, some kind of permission from the city that allows them to operate as a restaurant. Also, on that, it states that they're supposed to operate as a restaurant and do the business hours as a restaurant. And what the complaints is saying they're still playing pool. People were there till 3, 4 in the morning. That's not a restaurant. So basically what I was trying to get, just create kind of a conversation on the fact that, hey, can we get some kind of paperwork that y'all are trying, and we can have some on record to at least know how many bars are becoming restaurants, who's all going to be open. Because if I'm addressed with a complaint and I have no idea that you're even operating. So that's where the hiccup was. So I didn't want any kind of, me picking on a particular person, because the complaint came in for one bar, but that one bar advised me that 11 other bars were doing the same thing. So with that being said, I contacted the state. State kind of didn't want to have the dialogue with me, but they sent me the 12 bars that received the ATC license. So in an attempt to make contact with everyone, I sent the email stating like, hey, let's try to get in some kind of compliance or order where we can work forward with this. And that's where we made it here.
Anybody have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just make the comment that while I'm very concerned about addressing the issue that the bar owners have raised, and I do want them to be able to open, Corporal, your job is to enforce the law as written. And I know we have some upset constituents and business owners, but I certainly don't fault you as a member of the council for doing your job. If there needs to be a change to city ordinance or suspension of some rule that we have in place, we can do that, but I appreciate your doing your job as you believe you needed to do it. Thank you.
Any other member?
Yes. Piggyback on Councilman Nicholson, yes, you did what you were supposed to do or what you were required to do. I think I'm lost on people playing pool or other activities doing. When I go eat, I want to. If I'm going to a restaurant, I want to enjoy myself. And I understand that, and I heard it. The last lady that spoke, unprecedented times. That's what we have right now. And if playing pool helps me enjoy my dinner or in my restaurant time, then I think that's me. I think that's okay. I can social distance or whatever during that time. We have to do what we can as a council to make sure that Shreveport is still effective and efficient. And we can come together and work on other things. I think this is something that we can nip in the bud one way or the other. Simple. It's a simple fix somewhere, and I think that we need to go ahead and make that happen somehow today. I don't want to see any restaurant. I have family members that own restaurants. I have a family business myself. It's been rough, and it's been rough long enough, and we need to try to get back into the fix of what things, the old norm instead of the new norm, and let the new norm be what it be. But we got to fix this. Councilwoman.
Thanks. My question was for you as the veteran council person. In your last term, were there a number of things like this where it's like, why do we have, like what I'm hearing is the state said actually for you to have this permit, you had to have something from the city, but nobody came back to the city and said, hey, we're trying to do this for your vendors, but you don't have this mechanism.
Right.
But has that happened before, like in your last term? Like just little things like that are these weird inconveniences that need to get straightened out?
Normally, well, there had been maybe one or two things, but I had Agent Cisco who had a relationship at that time with some people from the state, and that was able to be accommodated, if that makes sense. But I think that now during this unprecedented time, things are more of a hassle than a help, and we need some help, and that's what we need to start working on and trying to help. Nothing against you, because I know you did what you were supposed to do, and I commend you for doing your job. I had inspections yesterday at my business, so I had 5 trucks to come over, and it looked like it was a raid on me. But I appreciate the city coming to do what they were supposed to do. But at the same time, we need to move forward and trying to help in these businesses get to where we need to be, and that's back in the thrive of getting tax dollars and making sure that they're taking care of their people. She even mentioned her housekeeping people. that spoke volume to me. We got to help everybody, and whatever it is we need to do, we need to come up with some kind of way to do that, and we need to do that today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councilwoman Taylor? I agree. I think that the police department did their job due to the way it is. My question is, if that was part of what the state requires is to have a city permit, then why did the state put these bar owners through the hoops and go ahead and issue this to them? I think this goes back to what we discussed, almost 2 years ago when I got on the council. We really need to get our laws in the city of Shreveport in line with what the state requires. And that's something that this council and the administration need to work on doing, because there's a lot of confusion. I'll be honest, I would be confused as heck if I had to read what was sent out. And it's not your fault. It's what the state statute is. And then here we are totally on the other side of it. So I agree with you, Councilman Bowman. We need to get this corrected as soon as possible, where these guys can get back, these guys and girls can get back to work and get, we need a revenue stream coming into Shreveport, and they are the backbone. I've said this all along, the entertainment industry in Shreveport is very big, and we've got to do what we can to help them get back to work. I had a long conversation this morning with our city attorney. He explained a lot to me, and I understand the legal aspect of it though too. What we have decided to do is we're going to do a resolution to suspend the rules, but it will have to be voted on Tuesday. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Latier, let him explain why this was sent out, why his opinion was what it was on this. And I will say I do support him, but it looks like that we've got a resolution in sight. So Mr. Latier.
Thank you, Councilman Bucci. First of all, to the bar owners, not only is there a law or a permit requirement by the state, but there's also a permit requirement by Shreveport. And pursuant to, I believe it's 275 statute, 26-275, it requires that you operate pursuant to the requirements of the state and the local governing authority. And the local governing authority has an ordinance in place that requires a bar, if it's going to operate, to have restaurant sales of 60% food sales, which obviously is a lot. But that's what the ordinance says. And I understand from the council that they want to suspend that ordinance so that everybody can go back in business. The only thing about that is the state requirement, I think, also requires that you produce 50% sales in food as well. And if you don't, I understand there may be an audit in effect after a certain period of time wherein you're required to produce those sales in that amount. And if you don't produce food sales in that amount, you could be shut down. So you need to be very well aware of that. Of course, Shreveport is not going to police that. That's up to the state. But there could be some potential liability against Shreveport if there's some type of accident or incident which follows from someone patronizing those bars, if it's found that those bars were not in compliance with the conditional permit for which they were issued. So we need to keep that in mind, and then it needs to be something to protect the city of Shreveport, whether it be a hold harmless or some type of indemnification agreement with those bars, that they'll be fully liable for any type of incident or damages that accrue from the operation of their bar if they're found in violation of the state requirements. That's the law.
What other specifics, Mr. Latier, would we have to put in there? There's a time that I've heard from several people. What would that hold harmless that you're talking about? Would that take care of that for us?
Yes, but I think that may require 2 readings as opposed to 1, which may cause a problem. I don't know a way to fix that at this time, but hopefully I may have something at the meeting.
Okay. So just where everybody will know, all the bar owners that are here, we will have, they're working. Mr. Latier said he would do his best to get it on the agenda for the Tuesday meeting. It only requires 1 read. So, and I believe just from sitting up here, I don't see anybody that's
Okay, I gotta
opposing.
get back to the meeting and make sure everybody's muted.
Okay.
Where's that mute all? Mute all, I saw it. Clear, where did it go? Mute all. Oh.
So anyway, I don't think anybody would oppose this once we review it. So, that's kind of the way we're gonna leave it. Hopefully, we gave y'all some explanations of what's going on, and hopefully we can get this taken care of as soon as possible. Anybody else have anything to comment on this?
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm not going by the measure if they use 50% or 60% of their food sales or whatever, so, hey, I'm ready to move forward with getting them back into business. That's where I'm at.
I am too.
Okay.
This is a,
Okay, thank you.
the laptop so he can hear. Okay.
That's Councilman Fleury trying to get into the meeting.
It's not muted.
No, it's not.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So that means that we're going to be closed till the next meeting, I'm assuming?
That's above my pay grade.
Yeah, okay.
I would get with the police department and check with them on that.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Busher?
Yes, sir.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to say, on behalf of the administration, that we're in full support of suspending those rules to allow these bars to operate in compliance with the state regs. I'd also like to state that, in my interpretation, the state was simply trying to provide a way for bars to operate as restaurants in cities that did not have ordinances in place. It was specific to state that it was that cities with ordinances was not necessarily required to meet that state statute or that state mandate in the proclamation. So I'm not trying to defend the state, but the state had some specific language in that proclamation that maybe we as an administration should have read and then came to council requiring or requesting the suspension of the ordinance sooner. So I'm not trying to defend the state, but I think there's some blame on both sides.
Well, thank you, Chief. And I guess to go back to Mr. Boydum's question, I mean,
Well,
no, go ahead.
well, Mr. Chairman, I'll just offer this thought: if the entire council is of the opinion that we ought to suspend whatever city ordinance is going to require these bars to close, the administration feels the same way. I mean, certainly with the administration's consent, the police department does have some enforcement discretion. Perhaps it should exercise that discretion and give the council time to address this before it closes any business for noncompliance. That would be my suggestion and request. Although I'll just reiterate that I appreciate the corporal doing his job as an officer. We've had a discussion, and I don't want multiple businesses to go out of business and people lose their jobs again because we just can't correct what sounds like was a collective oversight about the state of the city on this.
Thank you. As always, that's exactly what I was going to say. You just said it more lawyerly than I did. So,
Schoolhouse rock style now.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the consensus of the council and the consensus of the administration is that it was an oversight, and I would ask the chief to go lightly. Or Chief, you want to say something?
So, since it is a law, I cannot give a direct order to officers not to enforce it, but I have spoken with the officers that would enforce it, and they've agreed they're going to use a lot of discretion between now and the opportunity for the council to address it legally.
Discretion is all we ask for.
Perfect, Chief. Thank you. That's fine. Okay, thank y'all.
Thank you.
So moving on, the next item is a discussion of the fire and police raises. I'd also like to include the city marshal's office. In fact, I'd like for, we've not talked much about the city marshal, but I do want to include them in any raise that we do because they are post-certified deputies that do provide public safety to our city. And I'd like to ask Marshall Caldwell and Carl Richard to come up. They've got some numbers. The numbers are very, very small, and I think that the city can find that to go ahead and mirror what we do for the police department. So I'd like to recognize our distinguished marshal and Mr. Richard.
Good morning, council. McCall and I compiled some numbers to get with you guys in reference to the work that our deputies work tirelessly out there, along with Shreveport Police, throughout this pandemic, and it's really tiring on the guys and the ladies of law enforcement, I think, in every capacity. So Carl has some numbers here compiled for you guys.
We have 21 post-certified deputies in our office, and the total for the increase for the base pay would be $42,016.42.
Is that at 4%, Carl?
Yes, sir. And I have a copy for everybody if they'd like to have it. It shows what each deputy's increase would be.
That'd be nice if you could provide it to.
Yeah. I have 15.
Ms. White. 42,016. Y'all have anything else y'all would like to add?
I think that's it.
All right, thank you.
Council.
Thank you, Marshall. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Richard. All right, Chief Wolverton, would you like to give the fire departments? Thank you.
Morning. Council
Morning,
members.
Chief.
Chief White. First of all, I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity to stand before you again today and discuss this, what we consider most important endeavor of fire and police raises. There's three reasons these pay raises are needed as it relates to the Shreveport Fire Department. Number one is call volume. As explained in the last meeting, we showed you a graph of how the demands for service have increased over the past 35 years in the city of Shreveport. Some of our units are making nearly 4,000 to 4,400 calls for service in a year. And SFD is the largest fire-based EMS service in the state of Louisiana, but we are one of the lowest paid locally and regionally. We provide an outstanding service through an all-hazards response to our community. Our men and women are some of the most highly trained professional firefighters in the state and the region, and they deserve their pay to reflect that. The second point is retention. We're losing firefighters at an alarming rate, many leaving for more pay and less workload. This will help retain them here as our taxpayers have invested in their basic training, and we want them to remain here not only as public servants, but also as citizens of Shreveport. The last thing, thirdly, is recruitment. We need to be able to recruit competitively with our other fire departments in the region. We need to be able to attract paramedics to help fill the positions needed in our advanced life support transport service. And this will help us continue to provide the highest level of medical continuum of care to our citizens and visitors of Shreveport with our EMS service. For SFD to become competitive locally in pay will require a 17% increase. I shared that with you last time in a graph. We know that's not possible without a sustainable funding source. However, we offer today a starting point to work towards that goal with a 4% pay increase and a $100 increase for our paramedics to begin in January 2021. This will require funding from our EMS revenue and fire insurance rebate to be shifted and dedicated to this for 2021. Then we will all begin collectively working towards convincing our voters the need to support a quarter-cent sales tax that can provide $11 million plus annually. This will be a sustainable funding source that could be dedicated to the step pay increases to become regionally competitive in salaries and provide an annual equipment replacement program that is a critical and immediate need for our response apparatus fleet. It is our hope that as a council you will propose a resolution to appropriate funding for fire and police to implement this in January 2021 so that all public safety employees know that we've seen the need and we will begin working towards meeting that need as we move forward into 2021. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Chief. Chief, on your plan, the funding for this would come from the tax rebate, which is around 700 and some odd dollars. correct?
$738,000.
And then the rest would come from EMS revenue that's
Yes, sir.
generated by your department.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else have any questions for Chief Wolverton before we move on?
How much of it's coming from the EMS revenue?
Ma'am?
Like, how much of it would be coming from the EMS revenue?
The cost shows every position, every rank, from firefighter to the deputy chief, the number of personnel that will receive the raise. We have, in the gray, you'll see the current pay scale. In the brown, you'll see the new pay scale. Total cost would be $1,453,400.
Okay. So that entire amount of money is coming
That-
from the EMS?
That would come from the EMS revenue, yes, ma'am.
Well, no, some of it would come from the tax rebate.
Okay.
Correct?
Yeah, the tax rebate was $738,000.
The insurance rebate, I meant.
Insurance rebate.
Got it, okay, thank you.
So it'd be about $700,000 that would be coming out of EMS revenue.
Yes, sir.
And that would get your guys up to 4%.
Yes, sir.
And that does include FCOs as well.
Includes everyone on the department except myself.
Okay, Chief? Thank you. Chief Raymond?
Yes, sir. So we've produced a couple of different pay plans. I do think it's important to note, and Chief Wolverton mentioned it, this is really more of a Band-Aid effect at this point. The 4% will not get us up to the regional average base pay for police officers, but it will help. It will certainly, get us started for the conversation, hopefully next year, to try to allocate that 17% that we need. A little bit difference between police and fire. Fire statutorily has a incremental increase between the ranks, and it's generally about 10%, I believe. They do it from the base firefighter position, 10% first line supervisor, 20% for second line, something of that nature. The police departments, I don't know who initially developed our increases amongst the ranks, but it's kind of awkward. There's only a 6% increase between corporal and sergeant, and then it's an 8% between sergeant and lieutenant, 11.7 between lieutenant and captain, and a 20% increase to assistant chief. I'm more concerned about the money in the lower end of the totem pole versus the upper echelon, where we have people that are basically at the retirement level. So ideally, to straighten that out, I would want a 10% difference between the ranks, starting with sergeant through the rank of assistant chief. It's just going to take a little bit more money to be able to do that with a 4%. So if I were to implement the 10% separation plan, starting at a 4% increase for officers, it would cost our agency about $1.65 million in additional funding in 2021. That means I'd have to unfund an additional 33 police officer positions. I've mentioned previously, we already unfunded 29 positions just to meet next year's budget and the continuation budget of $60.58 million. So we're operating off 551 police officers in 2021 if we make no changes at all. If we unfund the additional 33 positions, that puts us only funding 518 police officer positions in 2021. I don't think we'll be able to maintain that. Although we have a lower staffing number at this point, we rely on those salaries to pay all the overtime we're having to pay because of that low staffing and some other personnel matters. So a 4% across the board, which would be maintaining those same separations we have now, would cost us $1.29 million. We'd have to unfund additional 26 police positions, so that means we'd unfund 54 positions in 2021, giving us funding for 526 police officers. We still could run, we should still be able to have an academy, depending on how many recruits we actually hire and how many officers we graduate. It would depend on whether we had money to hire additionally. I would say that I wouldn't feel comfortable operating at 526 funded positions for more than a year at most, because we're not healthy at 526. We're allocated 580. We really need to be around 550 to 560. That's where the police department's comfortable. Last year we were at that number early in the year. We saw historical crime lows. We had plenty of people working special operations. We had all our specialized units fully staffed. So I don't want to, if we have to unfund in order to make this pay raise, we're going to have to do something different next year to actually be able to fund it from a different revenue source, in my opinion.
Any questions?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a comment consistent with the comment I made at our previous public safety meeting that investing in public safety and compensating our firefighters and our police officers fairly has got to be a top priority for this community. One of the most important promises I made to the people that elected me a couple of years ago was that I would prioritize public safety. And so while I would always prefer to find money from somewhere other than a tax, we have to have revenue to run the city government, and I do think that the quarter-cent sales tax that Chief Wolverton mentioned is an appropriate way to take care of the men and women of the police department and the fire department who take care of us every day. Thank you.
Councilwoman Taylor?
So are we saying after a year, we got to come back and review this again?
We don't need to only fund 526 police positions from this point forward. We're not going to be able to address we're not going to be able to effectively serve the public if we can't hire more than 526 police positions. Because in reality, funding 526 police positions, I'm not able to hire 526 officers because I'll spend $1 million a year in overtime just on patrol hirebacks right now. That's 20 positions.
So is this going to be appropriate funding source for that, CAO Whitehorn?
Madam Councilwoman, the problem is neither source mentioned by either fire or police is really acceptable. The administration has always said that we're in support of a pay increase for our public safety. Public safety, as Councilman Nicholson stated, is our #1 priority. But there has to be recurring revenue sources to fund these positions. The funding source that Chief Warburton mentioned is already accounted for. What we're in the process of considering is force multiplying the current deficit. If you take away 20-something more positions from the police, he's already told you he can't operate at that level. Next year, we got to figure out how to get that money back. It's just not sustainable to consider using vacant positions or revenue that's already allocated to fund pay raises. In addition to that, we have many of our departments, all of our departments really deserve a pay raise. The only way to do it is, as Councilman Nicholson said, we've got to consider an increase. And whether it's as Mr. Kraft mentioned, a penny, a Lincoln on the Lincoln, or a quarter-cent, that's the avenue that's a decision that this council has to make. I can tell you, if we take away what we have, we are not going to be able to accomplish the expectations, the goals that y'all are setting for us, and to maintain the goals and expectations that the citizens expect.
So when we say that this is not sustainable, and as you said that you would need to come back within a year, really with what you have, that's the concern for me. If after a year, we put something out to the voters, and let's just say that it didn't pass, what's going to happen then? Is the question that I have. Because I don't want anybody to have something temporary. If you're gonna get it, I want you to get it. And then I want them to be able to get it all the way around, which each subsequent department as well. When you look at Public Works, when you look at property standards and those in that area. So that's the thing for me, is that I don't want a temporary fix for you all, and then after a year, something doesn't happen. Do we go back? Do we reduce it? Do we lose? What happens from that particular vantage point is the question that I have. And I'm concerned That's a concern, because I'm concerned with the number of officers in my area that I'm already lacking.
Yes.
How many officers have you lost in the last 6 months?
We have lost this year 45, I believe.
45? How many of those are retirements versus how many people are leaving for greener pastures, either in law
The
enforcement or
majority of
not?
them are resignations.
The
I
resignations.
think 12 have been retirements, and 26 or so, 25 have been resignations.
Do
And
you
there
do
are a
it-
handful of terminations in there, in that number as well.
Are you doing exit interviews?
I do, with those willing to come talk, you know, with those that want to reach out, and I can tell you, obviously, the retirements, you know, that's nothing new. Many of the resignations are going to other law enforcement agencies. A few of them are getting out of law enforcement altogether.
Thank you for that. Chairman, may I ask the chief of fire to come up and
Sure.
answer the same question?
Sure.
Oh, don't go anywhere yet. I might have more for you. I don't know that I do, but I might.
Yes, ma'am.
It's the same question. How many of you, how many people have retired, resigned in the last year? Or
So far in 2020, 26 retirements and separations. 6 more scheduled before the end of the year.
in your, with the separations, are you doing exit interviews, informal or formal? And what are they saying to you?
Basically, what I shared last time, there are those who are leaving for more money, less call volume. Many have left and gone over into the Dallas Metroplex area. A lot of the, some of the large departments, Fort Worth, Arlington, but also some of the smaller communities that are around the Dallas area, Plano, Farmers Branch, places like that.
Where not only do you get better pay, less call volume, but really good schools if you've got a young family.
Yes, ma'am.
The conundrum I think that we're in right now is when we lose your firefighters, medics, and your police officers, we're also losing residents. And one of the reasons that we're losing the residents that are civilians is they don't feel safe, but also seeking similar opportunities. So what I'm hearing from both fire and police is it's not just the pay and the call volume, but also the equipment and the strain. It impacts your mental health to take that home, but and suppress it. My dad watched football. He watched all the sports and cartoons. That was it. That's what he did. He worked graveyards for SPD. But I guess where I'm going with this is, in order for you all to retain when you're losing them so quickly, something has to give. So even if we're not sure what the revenue source is to get you to capacity, what you can guarantee is you're still gonna have people leaving, which actually kind of re-ups the amount of money that you've got as cushioning, pretty much, sadly. Does that sound about right, kinda? Like, even if we're able to stop the bleeding right now, you're gonna have some that are retiring, you're gonna have a few that are gonna still leave for those competitive things, that even if we're doing this symbolically and it might hold on to a few people, like some of this is gonna balance out with the number that are already gonna continue to go between now and whatever this went into place in January.
Yeah, I think the piece that's key to it, that's important that I can't address right now, is what is our recruiting woes going to continue? You know, if we could get back on track of graduating 20-25 officers in academy and having 2 academies a year, we'd be fine. We graduated 8 or 9 and 8 in the last year, and we've lost 44. That's what we can't continue to have happen. Hopefully, if there were a pay increase, that would contribute to having better recruiting and less attrition.
Thank you. I think that's what I've got for now. Thank you.
Chiefs, hold up 1 second. I think one thing that we may be missing as well, and the reason that I wish that we could find something, morale is such a big deal to police and firefighters. It is. I mean, our police station has fallen down. We have fire stations that are in disrepair. We have fire trucks that they're riding on that, I saw a Facebook post by a firefighter the other day. It said, starting my 4th shift with a fire truck that was made 5 years before I was born. Morale is a big deal. And although 4% may not mean a whole bunch, just to infuse the firefighters and police officers saying, look, we as a city care about y'all, maybe we can hold on to more. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Councilwoman, but being a firefighter for 20 some odd years and being a fire chief for the last 11 years, whenever I infused money back into my department and I got their pay up competitively, and we had better fire trucks in Shreveport at one point, it was like, man, everybody was doing their job. We were, they were looking good. They were clicking on all cylinders. Right now, it's almost like, it's like a vicious cycle. And the city is, I understand exactly what Chief Whitehorn's saying, and what Councilwoman Taylor's saying, but I just really think that a 4% would send a message to our people. Now, one other thing that we're talking about is you said we lost 45 police officers, 26 firefighters. Tell me how much it cost for one of those firefighters or police officers to graduate from our academy. What is the cost for training these officers and police and firefighters?
I don't have an exact number. We'd be including their salary or what it's costing for the instructors. And the
Well, instruction and salary while we're training them for the 6 weeks or
I'll
however
get that
long.
number to you. I don't have the top of my head.
I'd have to do the same thing, to figure out the number of hours training, firefighter 1, 2, and that, and, because we actually do advanced EMT now in our basic training, so that's a little bit lengthier class.
And I think about the direction you're probably going with that, I could probably explain while we're on the topic. We had a policy that we had to sign a contract for years. I signed it. If you leave the department within either 24 or 36 months, you owe the agency, I think it was $2,000, and it was because of the money we spent training you. We went to try to collect that when I was the chief administrative assistant and ran into a legal snafu because Louisiana statute does not allow you to not pay an employee's final paycheck if it's part of their salary. And so we would have to renegotiate that contract where it was additional money outside of a salary, and we just never went through that process. So we don't currently have anything in place. So if you go through our academy, graduate, and start a new agency the next day, which has happened, we can't do anything about it.
Is there anything that we can legally look into that? I remember at Fire District 5, I trained one person through y'all's academy. It cost me about $5,000 or $6,000 just for the training part of it, not including her salary. She left three months after she graduated, and we ran into the same issue trying to hold her check for those monies. But there's got to be something that we can do, because I remember when Heather was at SPD, she had to sign a 3-year contract, if I'm not mistaken. But my concern is, we're talking about starting this academy up, and we want to be able to get the cream of the crop, number one, with the academy, and we want to be able to retain the cream of the crop to be able to have a strong police department and fire department. And I'm a little concerned that if we don't do something to kind of try to stop the bleeding, like you said, Chief Raymond, a Band-Aid. If we don't do this now, we're going to continue to keep spiraling down a dark hole that we're not going to be able to climb ourselves out of. So if you would give me those numbers, I'd appreciate how much it costs to train those firefighters and police officers. Councilwoman?
You just got me kind of amped, because what I wanted to add to that is, if I'm understanding right, we're basically training paramedics to leave. Because
paid training. They're going to college and we're paying them.
The gap between medic and paramedic is not enough incentive for people to actually go through the training unless they're basically training here to go away at $10,000 or $20,000 more annually. Do I have that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So that's a really so I mean, if we're going to do that, we might as well just start a consulting firm on our dime if we're just going to train them to go somewhere else,
Well, and Councilwoman, I'd add this too. Our firefighters and police officers are very attractive to smaller agencies in Texas because of the number of calls and the number of serious calls that we have here. So they're attractive because not only are you getting well-trained firefighters, well-trained police officers, but you're getting well-experienced firefighters and police. If somebody comes and stays 2 years, I've been told at the Shreveport Police Department, if they stay 2 years, they've probably done as much work as a police officer in Bossier does in 10 years.
kind of great and kind of terrible, isn't it?
Yeah. So basically, I look like we're doing, at the taxpayer's expense, we're providing people with free training, free experience, and I don't blame them. And then they're leaving for greener pastures to make $20,000 or $30,000 a year and go where, like Councilwoman Fuller said, better schools and lower crime rates. So this is something that's very serious to me, and I think that Councilman Nicholson said it best. We ran on public safety, and if we have to cut things to be able to get this raise for these guys and ladies, that's something that we're gonna have to do. We are at, in my opinion, the drop dead. And then we go to the full funding. Hopefully we can go to the taxpayers and say, look, we wanna do a 1/4 sales tax. The thing I like about the sales tax is Shreveport is becoming where people come to work, but they go home to other areas. But on the way home, they're gonna stop at Walmart, they're gonna stop at our Dillard's, they're gonna stop at our Sam's. We're still collecting tax revenue as opposed to putting all of the burden on our already, and it's not the city taxes. I'm gonna go on record, our city taxes are not that high. It's when you combine parish, school board, you have a $300,000 house, you're paying $5,000 in property taxes. We cannot continue to do that. So I think sales tax, in my opinion, a 1/4 sales tax or whatever it takes to fund a raise to get us comparable to Bossier, and equipment for our police and firefighters, and to fix our facilities that are in disrepair to some extent, is the direction we need to go. And I'm 100% support that. But we've got to do everything in our power to at least do a stopgap to stop the bleeding in the meantime. So,
That
thank
last
you.
part, I want to appeal to your fiscal conservatism and just say that what I'm hearing from the public is they will not entertain any talk of any kind of tax or fee if they don't see us do the work on our end first to tighten something up.
And I think we're doing that. I think the administration and the council is doing that. And I think you'll see that during this budget season more than probably we have, because we're dealing with a pandemic, we're dealing with officers and firefighters leaving. So when it comes to public safety, I think we're gonna have to do a deep, deep dig this year, as opposed to going and sitting and listening to a 5-minute presentation from each one of y'all.
I think in some aspects you guys can speak for your half on your constituents, because my constituents don't say the same thing when it comes to police. Some of them are in disarray at this particular point in time because of some of the things that have happened within this community. So you can speak on your half, but I have a different perspective on that, dealing with some things that happen with my constituents within the inner city. Now, at that point, I don't think that police raises or firefighter raises isn't important to any of us. All of that, I know it is. I know how many times I've called on the fire department. I did the ride along and look at the stations and know they're in total disrepair for some of the men and women that risk their lives every day. So before we get to the point that we turn around and we think that, okay, this is not gonna happen, or this is what some citizens are saying, let's not address the elephant in the room as well. That we also have some rapport that we're gonna have to build within community for them to go over there and do that. I'm not looking for something temporarily just to go over there and then they're gonna have to revert back if the citizens decide that they don't wanna give a quarter cent tax or whatever tax that we put out there. What happens then? What happens then to the men and women that we arbitrarily give this raise? Do we turn around and we take it back after a year? How is that going to help us still? So I think that when we look, in the collective as that as well. I want to give you whatever it is that you need. I want you to have fire trucks that work. On my way home yesterday, I saw one on the side of the street on I-20. And I was like, oh my God, what happens on the way to an emergency? I read the major notes to know that sometimes you get in fender benders with your cars, that you see that. But I also have a concern when there are not enough officers within my district, and I have the largest one in this city. So that thing there becomes very real to me. I want to look at something, but I'm not going to look at something that's going to hurt us. I don't want it to hurt us long term. I want them to have what they need so they can continue and morale doesn't die, and then in the middle they're wavering, wondering if they're going to have this money in the long term. If they're going to get it, then they need to get it. So they'll know that they have it, and then we know what we're working with. I don't want to get it and then take it back and then neither one of you have what you need.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
you asked earlier about the cost for a new employee.
Yes, sir.
I've had some 2009 numbers for police. Just on personnel costs alone for a new hire, it was $29,065. When you add equipment, the cost goes up to a total of $68,560 per officer if you're providing vehicles and other equipment. If you take the vehicle cost out, that's $39,495. So,
Wow. Thank you, Chief. Okay, does anybody else have anything?
I'm not even gonna make anything up because it wouldn't be funny. You know, I'm not gonna bother y'all anymore for at least the next 5 minutes.
Okay. Okay, is that all? Councilman Bowman?
I do, but I don't.
Okay. All right, I think we've discussed that all we can. Let's move on. Chief Raymond, if you'd like to discuss the guidelines that you put forth about police response, and I will say this as you're making your way up, and this is to Chief Whitehorn and to Chief Raymond. I would like, as a council member, and I think I speak for my colleagues, to maybe get this in advance, not because once this hit the news media, I started getting calls and I didn't know what to say. And that's fine. I mean, I told him, look, I'm going to talk to Chief Raymond, and I did, and he explained everything to me. But in the future, if we're going to do a big news release about something that affects the citizens, I would like for it to come to us a day or so before, where we can kind of ask the questions we need to ask. Not to say that what he did is wrong. I'm just saying I would like to have a little bit of notice. So go ahead, Chief.
Yes, sir. And I've done several interviews. The intent was to do a press conference last week. That kind of fell to the wayside with hurricane coming through. We knew, number one, you're not going to do a press conference on Thursday, the day of the hurricane, and any press conference you do on Friday, from a public relations perspective, is generally lost in the wind with the weekend. So I'll take responsibility for having not done one. Looking back, we probably should have found a way or possibly postponed the date. We've been discussing restructuring calls for service since I was hired 20 years ago. It's been more of a conversation in recent years, and specifically it was brought to my attention about 6 weeks ago from our internal committee for change, which is that group of primarily senior staff members that have been police officers 25, 30 years that help provide direction for the department. They help say, hey, we thought about this, or I can bounce the ideas off of them. And I think it's better for us to be a collective front versus a single individual making changes for a department of 500 people. Rather, there's 30 of us that talk to the other 500 in some form or fashion and make suggestions for the betterment of the department. And that's what this was. So those staff members came to me and said, look, this would be a perfect opportunity to talk about the calls for service we respond to. We're short on manpower. We're skeleton crew and specialized units. We're forcing officers to work patrol hirebacks. Why don't we decrease the calls for service? In theory, you won't have to have as many officers to meet that required staffing number in a district. And so we looked actually about 20 different types of calls that are not really criminal in nature. We don't think they should really fall under the law enforcement purview. But what the police department had kind of become is, you call us, we'll come. And in most people, it's easier to remember 911 than all the other numbers associated with all the special organizations and 501c3s and other government agencies. So quite literally, if there's a roach in my bathroom and I'm scared, I'm gonna call 911 because police are gonna come. And if I get a nice police officer, they'll come kill the roach for me. And if I get a mean one, they'll say, don't call 911 again, we'll take you to jail. You know, but either way, a police is gonna respond. And so, even though that's kind of a funny matter, that happens. Snakes, alligators, roaches. Poor little kitty was left on my front porch. So police would respond, and then we'd get there and say, okay, this is really not police matter. I'm calling Cattle Animal Services. Or I'm going to direct you to do this or do this. You need to call your exterminator. But that takes time. Some of these calls we're writing reports on that take time, such as private property accidents. A large number of agencies have moved away from doing private property accidents. I spoke with Louisiana State Police yesterday. They don't even do a private property accident when one of their own troopers is involved in it, in their unit. It's not defined as an accident by Louisiana revised statute. And so we responded to a large number of them. That's about a 30, 45-minute process to write the report. And it was a favor to the citizen so that you could present it to your insurance company if you needed to seek damages. But the reality is it's not necessary. You just call your insurance company, you tell them, I bumped into Miss Susie at the Brookshires, this is what she was driving, this is her insurance information, this is my insurance information, and the insurance companies work it out. So it's saving officers time. A lot of juvenile matters are really better fit for the Volunteers of Youth Justice Program or the Caddo Juvenile Services. It's dealing with truancy and curfew violations, and some of those things can teeter on criminal just because your child won't get up to go to school. You really don't need police responding. That opens up a whole other can of worms. We talk to parents that say, my kids have been scared of police since they were 2 years old. Well, that's a learned behavior. They may be scared of police because every time they did something wrong, you said, I'm going to tell a police officer and take you to jail. Or when you didn't get up for school, a police officer came and woke you up. So that contributes to a whole slew of problems we have when that person becomes 16, 17, and they say they've always disliked police officers. To a degree, they may dislike police officers because we were brought in to be the disciplinarian in their life. So this opens up a lot of areas where police really shouldn't be responding. And so to address that, there's about 10 different things, and I'll go through the list, and I know I've mentioned a couple specifically, but I'll certainly talk about any specific one you have. The private property accidents, parking complaints, we will still respond, but we're primarily going to use our Community Joint Policing Bureau to solve those problems if at all possible during their hours of 8 to 5. Ungovernable juveniles, animal complaints, message delivery and complimentary rides where we try to bring someone from this place to that place. It's become where we're almost like a taxi service, so we're going to move away from that as much as possible. Civil matters, boyfriend, girlfriend getting in a fight, and boyfriend's moving out of the house. They want us to sit there while they unload a dresser, a TV, the washer and dryer. It might take several hours. Where we still respond now, but we're going to tell you, get your pair of pants and your night bag and come back when your girlfriend's not here and move out appropriately, something like that. Child custody disputes, we encourage you, instead of calling a police officer because your ex is showing up with the child and there might be a problem, come to the police station. We have that safe area. There's always a police officer in the patrol desk. We can supervise that exchange. You don't have to be concerned that it's going to turn violent or something like that. Misdemeanor thefts, this one's got a lot of conversation, but I don't think it was understood well. If there's someone committing a theft, we're going to respond. So if someone's stealing a weed eater out of Walmart or Lowe's and you call the police, we're coming. But if you call us an hour after they stole the weed eater and say, I need a report for insurance purposes, which happens all the time, we're going to take that report over the phone. We may still even investigate it if you've got video, suspect information, vehicle description, something like that. The property crime detective will follow up a few days later, just as always. But it's easier for you to call that in at that point than to have to send an officer to the scene when there's not even a suspect or any evidence to obtain. Drug complaints, if it's an ongoing drug concern, that's better handled by our narcotics officers because they can conduct an investigation and do a better job when they do clear up that problem. If it's something that's happening right now, I'm watching a hand-to-hand outside my window, we'll respond to that. And then a lot of the complaints associated with the pandemic are really under the purview of Louisiana State Fire Marshals, and so we're going to do a better job. If it's a crowding concern at a business or a restaurant, call the State Fire Marshal. Now, if it's a large crowd gathering at, in a parking lot or a park or something that's really not COVID related, then police respond. In all these matters, many of these still may be dispatched to a supervisor on patrol, give them some details, and that supervisor will decide, do we need to respond to that or not? So it's not a blanket you call and we have a list and the dispatcher says we're not responding to that. If you get some information, so civil matter, civil matter is one of those that could teeter on domestic, depending on exactly what's happening. So the dispatcher will get all the information. They'll contact a sergeant in that district to say, okay, this is what we have, and that sergeant will make a determination. Does an officer need to go to that because that could turn violent or it could be criminal or something of that nature? Or does the supervisor need to call that person back individually and speak with them? Or do we need to just say, we're not going to respond to that at this time?
Thank you, Chief. I think that this is one of the things that Councilwoman Fuller just spoke about, that we're trying to show and be good stewards of taxpayer money. I know it does take away a little bit, but this is the first step of doing exactly what she said before you go to the taxpayers and ask for additional money. We're revamping the way we do things, which probably should have been done a long time ago. So I worked as a fire communications officer for about 6 years and answered 911 calls, and from what time is it to can you send a fireman over to help me check the temperature on my cake? I mean, if you'd sit in there for a little while and listen, it would be, it's pretty interesting to what the fire and police department go out to that are really not true emergencies.
We used to get a lot of this at the library. I feel like they should all go to the library. We get things like who won next top model and all of that. But it makes my ears itch to think that people are calling because there's a pig running down the street and the police are getting called for that. And it's even scary. You think that in our limited capacity that you're chasing after a pig and you really can't go to a really serious call that's coming in at the same time. You know, that kind of, in the back of my head, that just kind of festers. So I think that the way that it was unrolled kind of left us a little confused. But I think my question might be, is this going to require additional training at the call center?
And we've been doing that for about the last few weeks. It's been in conversation. So that September first date was picked a few weeks back, but we didn't want to roll it out until I wanted to speak with Cattle Animal Services and make sure they understood, hey, we're fixing to throw your name and number out there. If you start getting more calls, is this the appropriate number to call? You know, kind of reach out to some of these other entities instead of just throwing it at them. So we've been training in-house for a few weeks, but we're going to put most of that back on the patrol supervisor, not try to explain to the dispatcher all the nuances of a call. Let that sergeant that's been doing it for 20 years, you give me the call, and then he'll make the decision based on his experience.
And Chief, to restate what you said about misdemeanor thefts, which was the bullet point on your release that I received the most expressions of concern about, you're not going to send police officers to investigate misdemeanor thefts after the fact, but if a shoplifter is apprehended, you're certainly going to send somebody out to deal with that.
Yes.
And if there's a theft in progress, your policy has not changed about dealing
Absolutely.
with that.
A lot of your larger companies have kind of developed policies for the safety of their employees that they don't actually try to, they don't report a lot of these crimes as they're occurring. They report them after the fact, and we make a number of arrests a day after the fact. But if it's just simply you're reporting it because you want to start the process, you know, then we're going to do that over the phone.
Sure.
And then a property crimes detective will still go out 2 or 3 days later, hey, show them what video you have, what license plate do I need to run, and we'll still make those arrests, but there's no point in an officer driving out there at that moment just to make that report.
And my only other comment about the changes you've described is that, well, I certainly don't want police officers sitting for hours at a time while people unload dressers and refrigerators. I do hope that if victims of domestic violence need access to their homes to get their belongings, that we'll still provide police support for that, because without that support, those situations can be dangerous.
Yeah, and we're also going to direct them. The city marshal's office has an eviction process, just to make sure it's done appropriately, because it is a little bit of a, it really does teeter on civil matters when you're trying to move out a TV and you say it's mine and she says, no, it's mine.
I think, too, what Councilman Nicholson said on domestic violence, since our numbers are so high within this state, is a very real concern when it comes to that civil matter as well. So I would hope, in what Councilwoman Fuller said as far as training is concerned, that we're definitely looking at if calls have been made to this address and we know that there's a history of domestic violence that's there, and sometimes we know that those victims go back and return to those homes, that we were intervened, because I know that that could be a very dangerous situation as well as for the victim and for you all as well. So that's a real concern for me.
And we're gonna monitor these closely and make sure that there's nothing, if things are slipping through, right? So if we start having incidents in which an officer should have responded and it's slipping through because we've made a change in civil matters, then we'll just remove that from the list and we'll go back to let's respond to all of them. So we're gonna monitor it closely.
Okay.
Chief, one thing going back to civil, have you spoken to Marshal Caldwell about this? Because, you know, he said he has 21 post-certified deputies. I don't know if they have the manpower to be going and taking care of civil matters other than the evictions and things like that. So have you coordinated with him on any of this?
No, and you're right. I haven't spoken to Marshal Caldwell. Some of my staff reached out to Marshal Jefferson, I believe, and told the same thing. They don't have the staff to go out and sit while during that process, but they can point the person in the direction of what the eviction process is. And if a judge issues an order that says do this, then obviously an officer will go out and do that. But at that heated moment when you're getting kicked out of your house, or there's that you know, it's really not a criminal matter as to whose TV is this, whose bed is that. It's more of a, let's get out of here, let's separate, let's let everything calm down. Generally, it works out better 24 hours later when the heated argument's gone and one of the two parties is not present.
I just didn't want, I heard on an interview somewhere that we're gonna let the city marshal, and I don't know if it was you or who, but we'd let the city marshal handle the civil stuff, and I cringed when I heard that, because, I mean, they're low on manpower when you talk about all the evictions that they have and repossessions and the courthouse, and I don't know if that's a very good analogy to be using, that we're gonna turn it over to the marshal, because
We'll do a better job, you're right, I agree.
Okay, anybody else have anything on this? Chief, stay here for 1 second.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Councilman? You're quiet.
I'm trying to be quiet.
I like that new mask. That's why you're trying to stay quiet.
matches your
It
shirt.
does. Okay, I have a couple of questions. Chairman Fleury talked to me today, and I think he was planning on being here, and I think we had some technical difficulties, but and I agree with him, and I think this goes along with what Councilwoman Taylor said. I think, and the chairman called me today about this, he's adamant about trying to get the state police in to help us while we're having so much trouble. And I don't think that it's a secret that you have manpower issues right now. And I think you're doing everything you can with what you've got. We just spent an hour talking about what we need to do. But I do feel like it's time for us to bring in some outside agencies, possibly the sheriff's office, especially out in my district that's somewhat rural, and maybe in some of the northern parts where Councilwoman Taylor's district is, that abuts where Blanchard, and to maybe at least, and I've said this over and over again, and I don't think that it's anything to do with what the Shreveport Police Department's doing. It's just, we just don't have the manpower. And if we could pull the sheriff in to maybe help us on those northern fringes, the western fringes out by some of Councilman Bowman's district, in my district, to kind of relieve y'all where y'all can focus on these high crime areas. And I'm not a cop by any means, but I would really like for us to maybe start talking about that as soon as we can.
And I'll say it for the record, I've said, we read all the time, they're more than welcome. We invite, I love the sheriff's office and state police. I wish they had more people than we did in the city of Shreveport. They're is more strapped than we are. I don't want to talk about their numbers, but it would floor you if I told you how many troopers patrol a 7-parish area. And I don't want to speak specifically for Captain Williams or Sheriff Prater, but I think they both will tell you they know they're invited. I send them emails, we have conversation often, but they are facing the same difficulties we're facing. The sheriff has sent a lot of people back to patrol. He's eliminated a lot of units. I think he sent his K-9 units back to patrol several months back, which when you get to that level, you're probably worse off than we are. And his responsibility is in those conversations is again, it's those outer agencies of Shreveport that have no law enforcement presence. That's where if they don't have a sheriff's deputy there, they have nobody. And so they do assist, and they are welcome. I can assure you.
Councilman
Mr.
Booster,
Chairman.
that's one of the other things that we look at too in the continuous talks that I've had with Chief Raymond as well as LSP, is the number of troopers that they have available, which aren't many, to go over there and help in subsequent areas that are needed as a supplement to SPD. Is one of the things that we're running into, one of the things that I've been speaking with Representative Phelps on resources and things that we need. And I know and CEO Whitehorn can speak to, the specific calls that they've made in reference to the governor's office, and I'll let him do that because he can speak for himself.
Yes, sir, Chief.
Yes, in addition to what Chief Raymond mentioned and Councilwoman Taylor, the mayor has written a letter to the governor and has had conversation requesting state police come into our city and assist us with our crime situation. Those talks are still ongoing, but we believe that we will get some relief from those.
Good. Glad to hear that, Chief. Thank you.
There's
Okay,
one
Chief.
thing that we do in working with, literally, we're working with our state representatives to go over there and push what we need for this area, for whatever special operations that he has going on, and where he would need that supplemental support, then we will get what we need to make our community safer for sure.
Chief, one other thing real quick that's been brought to my attention too. are we in any position to start a reserve academy?
We have looked at a reserve academy. Several issues. One is a number of agencies historically, their reserve officers have gone through less curriculum. We feel that's a liability for the city of Shreveport just because of some of the issues we do have. We need you to be fully trained, 18-week academy graduate, just like another officer. The second thing is you're asking a person, with that being the case, we're asking a person free of charge to attend 500 hours of training on their own time. Very few people are in a position to do that. We've looked at evening academies and weekend academies, but we have limited manpower at the academy. They're skeleton crew. We could pay them overtime, but it'd be really hard for them to work 40 hours a week for the academy for our police officers, and then work another 40 hours on top of that for a reserve academy. It's difficult with an agency our size and with the number of calls we receive. It's a little easier if I have a smaller agency that responds to 10,000 calls service a year. We're a large agency that responds to 250,000 calls for service a year. And so it's just so much more you need to really be proficient at.
I was told that the way it is now, like the sheriff's office has non-post certified reserves, and then the post cert, and I think Bossier does something.
And we have auxiliary. Councilman Fleury is an auxiliary.
But from what I was told is some of the, if they've gone through and they've become post qualified, which is different than post certified, that there's something in the works now that if you're post qualified and have gone through the reserve academy, that you'll be full post, you'll be grandfathered in, I think 2022, maybe?
Yeah, I believe the change is that after that date, you have to attend the full academy. And so a lot of smaller agencies, again, they're bringing people on board and giving you a 2-week training. I personally would not feel comfortable with the person with 2 weeks of training.
Oh, I wouldn't either,
in our city, just me, speaking from experience.
I would like to see us pursue something. I guess that my question would be about the academy. When there's not an academy going on or any retrainer going on, could those officers at the academy, could their work schedule be?
In theory, they could, but there's never. We have a retrainer every other week, and we have 36 weeks of academy a year. And like right now, we have a crisis intervention training going on. Some gentlemen from Houston. I mean, there's always academy training going on.
I'm just trying to look for any way that we can have more police cars on the street.
And now that you mentioned it, ironically enough, we have to buy police cars next year. If we had additional officers right now, they wouldn't be in police cars in the street. They'd be riding with the police car on the street.
Go ahead and add some salt to that wound there, Chief.
How many do you have in shop right now?
But I will reach back out to the academy. We have had some of those conversations, and I'll reach back out to them and see if there's any other options we haven't looked at.
Or even have a little bit more robust auxiliary program than what we have. Maybe do some recruiting for that. At least that would get some, when you do have cars, at least that would get some cars
There's
out
like
there.
a lot that are in the shop right now, right?
There are a lot in the, we haven't purchased cars in 2 years, so you have that compound effect where you total out 20 or 30 a year for 2 years. That's 60 cars that aren't replaced. And so that's kind of where we are now.
Between that and knowing that our reserve fire engines are from the year I was in the 5th grade, I just don't know what to be sadder about.
We have some money rolling off the books in 2021 for the large purchase made in 2016. And we really, I was going to bring up the budget meetings that we really need to reinvest that money. Purchase cars next year. The note won't come until 2022.
Hashtag goals.
All right, Chief, thank you. Chief Wolverton, real quick, we're talking about equipment. Any updates on the Bossier City fire trucks?
I'm still waiting on confirmation from Chief Zagone about that. Have not got confirmation from him yet. Also trying to work out the details on what it'll take to do an intergovernmental purchase to move forward with that.
Would it
we
help
follow
if
all the right steps?
Would it help if maybe the administration wrote Bossier's administration a letter saying, if you sell these trucks, we'd really like to buy them? Because, Chief, are you aware about the trucks that Bossier has over there?
Yes, sir. I've had conversation with Chief Wolverton about it. I'll keep my thoughts to myself with the media in here, but I think it's a crying shame.
As far as the trucks being there?
No, having to
Yeah.
buy hand-me-down trucks.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, thank you, Chief. Anybody else have anything else?
It's lunchtime, Grayson.
Okay, nothing else, we adjourn.